Dr. Arun Bali. Dr. Bali is both a sociologist and a social gerontologist. He is a former director, Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. He was a visiting fellow at the Department of Sociology, Karnataka University, Dharwad, and also visiting faculty at the School of Architecture, Ansar Institute of Technology. He was a fellow of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, from 1996 to 1998, PAD fellow affiliated to the International Institute of Asian Studies, Leiden, and stationed at the University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. He has contributed several papers in professional journals and books. His research interests are in the field of social gerontology, sociology of social movements, sociology of religion, sociology of professions, and higher education. He has participated in several national and international conferences and presented research papers. He has also organized several national and international conferences. He is a life member of many professional associations, and he was managing editor of the ICSSR's flagship journal, Indian Social Science Review, between 1998 to 2005. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Sudesh Namasu. It is my privilege and pleasure to be in your midst, speaking to you. Let's all together, in the course of the next couple of minutes, try to collectively understand the intricacies and complexities of doing research in the field of sociology and more so in social gerontology, and also handling the ethical issues involved in doing such research. At the outset, my sincere thanks to you, Professor Basu, for inviting me to speak on this occasion. I also would like to thank the head of the department, Dr. Karl Liamat Samling, for agreeing to host me. A profuse thanks to all of you, teachers and researchers, for taking time off and joining us in this venture today. The talk would consist of primarily 3 sections. This is primarily for convenience and nothing more. It will begin with a brief introduction to what social science research is all about, along with good practices and research processes involved in undertaking such research. This then will be followed by a brief overview of the elements constituting what is a good research proposal. The last section touches upon aging as an area of research and also looks at ethical issues involved in undertaking such type of research and the importance of ethical issues involved in undertaking such a research. In social sciences, we try to understand and explain social phenomena or problems of individuals and society, both and groups in society. Social science research is not only about society, but it is also produced in society. What we are and how we study this phenomenon is very important. Even though we divide this analytically, but for all practical purposes, everything is connected to one another. One should remember that social sciences constitute an array of disciplines. As far as the ICSR is concerned, they almost have 24 social science disciplines. So you get an idea of the range of social science disciplines. And also, all these social sciences have different methodologies, different approaches, as well as there is no single approach or a single guideline which we would say that this is what a research proposal ought to be. Every individual brings in his own academic inclinations, he brings in his own proclivities and sensitivities to the research problem. So as we say that there is no single way of doing research, just as there is no uniform manner in which one prepares and presents a research proposal. There exists a plurality of approaches, and what then research proposals vary generally in format, and what we normally include are the introduction, which includes an overview of the proposal, a statement of the problem and its significance, the focus of inquiry, and research questions. I'll get to this a little bit later. Now, this would then involve looking at things like, is the research worth doing? Is the researcher competent conduct this type of research? And finally, is the research very carefully planned and likely to be executed by the scholar? It also should demonstrate the significance of any particular study. Why do you want to? Why do you think it's important? So, a good proposal is what research is intended, why is it being researched, and what and how the scholar proposes to carry out such type of research. Now, preparing this also has certain things in mind. One is a good proposal should be really straightforward, not complicated. Do not use technical jargon to prepare your research proposals. Second, it should be clear and precise in terms of the language you propose to use. And finally, you'll have to have a clear vision of what you want to investigate. Why do you think it's interesting to investigate such a problem? And how will you approach these type of problems? So these then constitute what are good practices. So developing a research proposal, I think I should, many of you would be aware, but I thought let me take this opportunity to spell out a few things. So developing a research proposal, first of all, includes uh, identifying or choosing a topic. Now, once you choose this topic, now if you are doing it for a PhD, now there are a whole lot of ranges for which you do, whether it's for funding or that's for your own doctoral degree or for, you know, preparing for publication. Now, I would look at it in terms of the doctoral work. Now, here, a couple of things are needed to be taken into account. First is the topic. Is the topic, then you'll have to look at who will guide you in your research in the department or elsewhere. Now, is this supervisor interested in this particular area of research? Now, these things you will have to take into account. Now, what is it that you propose to do? Now, you should be very clear and explain why do you want to do this research? How do you propose to achieve? So here comes in the objectives. Justify all these in the light of existing research. Now, it does not mean that we are the only persons who are really doing research or want to do on it. Probably there have been other persons who would have worked on this area or related to this area which you are trying to propose. So you'll have to look at the review of literature. So what does this do? It provides you the focus to undertake the study. So it narrows down helping you. Then you also tells the assessor who assesses your proposal that you are aware of relevant literature pertaining to the subject. Then, where and when are you going to conduct this research? Now, this is important. That's the location, whether it's going to be in Calcutta or it's going to be in Delhi or it is going to be somewhere else, in an urban area, in a rural area, or what is your research setting. So a research setting is also very important. Then it also, you will have to spell out how will you collect the data, what are the methods you will be using. Here comes in the question of research methodology. It could be quantitative methods, it could be qualitative methods, so a whole range of them you would all be knowing. Then once you have collected this data, how would you analyze the data, how would you present this data? So this is very important. And then most important is the timeline and the budget. So there is nothing, you can't go on indefinitely. Normally a PhD would take at least 4 to 5 years. Are you prepared to invest that much time? And what will be your financial implications? Now, in terms of the time lag, how much time you will spend in collecting your data, how much time you will spend in analyzing the data, how much time you will really take to write up your proposal. So you'll have to keep all these things in mind. So provide the context around which your research is going to be done. Then the resources, particularly you will need what will be the cost involved in the equipment if it is necessary, fieldwork expenses, travel expenses. Now you would have to travel. So where will you get your finances? Will you ask for some funding agency or will you draw it from your own resources? If it is a funding agency, there are a couple of agencies which I would like to mention where one could approach for seeking grants. One would be the UGC. Second is the Indian Council of Social Science Research. You also have the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, the Indian Council of Historical Research, and the Indian Council of Cultural Relations. As also the Ministry of Human Resource Development also offers a certain set of uh, funding for certain proposals. You could explore those possibilities. I thought I should mention this so that you have a fair idea of what you do. Now, you'll also have to look at having done all this, what you'll have to think what will be the contribution of your research to the social sciences, to the society at large, and to the persons whom you would be investigating. So, will they benefit from your research or will they not benefit from your research? Now, these are things which you'll have to really keep in mind. So, finally, I'll, what should a research proposal include? One is a project title, indicate what your proposed research is all about. Two, who will be your research supervisor? Proposed mode of research, aims and objectives. Then you should have a small synopsis running to about 250 to 300 words. Then the background to your research proposal, the expected research and contribution, methodology, time, and feasibility. I thought I have just done all this. Now, what happens? Now we move on to, if you're thinking of aging as one of humanity's major preoccupations. Now, why does it appear? Well, if you look at aging, does not appear to be a unilinear dimension. It's multifactorial and multidisciplinary. No single discipline will be able to understand the problems of the aging, the aged, and age. All the three things are important. Many definitions, also run across for aging. So there's no single definition. It all depends on the individual as well as. Now let's see. If you take aging, how do you define age? Now it can be you have municipal records. Now in the current days, you will be able to get what will be the date of birth. Now I have during the course of my fieldwork, many respondents told me, well, take my own case. It was the director of the institute then. He said, in my class, there were 77 students. All of them have the same date of birth. Now, this is something different, but all of them will age differently. They'll face problems differently. So, one has to be careful about it. Now, which are the disciplines which normally get into it? One is demography, one is political science, sociology, economics, and the rest. Now, studying problems of the aged, one over a period of time, one has seen speech is what really summarizes most of the problems of the aged. Now, you'll ask me why speech. You'll have to spell it SPEECH. Speech is also a medium of trying to communicate with your respondents, the agent. Now, what are those things which get? I'll only mention a few of them. Take the first S is for social relationships. Now, within this, you have kinship, marriage, social connectedness, social outcomes, stress, widowhood, services of the elderly, quality of life, widowhood, all these come under this. So, a whole range of them, family as well, intergenerational relations. Then you come to the second letter, P. It's the psychological dimensions. So, you have depression, adjustment, self esteem, psychosocial change, stress in aging, perceptions of aging, attitudes to aging, coping with aging. Then you come to the next letter called E, is education, lifelong education, environment, physical, social environment, and natural environment. Then you come to the second E, is the economic aspects of aging. So you have things like retirement, employment, post-employment, once you retire, dependency ratio, economic status. So these are things which, are some of them. Then you go to C, culture. So culture is very important. How a person ages in what culture. Every culture has its own approaches to the aging process. Next is communication, language, coping, caregiving, crime, civil society. All these are other aspects which you can see how many issues are involved. Then you go to H. H is housing, health, mental, both physical, healthcare, rehabilitation, medical rehabilitation, and a whole range of other issues. I thought I'd just bring up these issues so that you know how complicated or how difficult it is to study problems of the elderly. Now, I'll get on to what is meant by now serious examination of gerontologic issues in India is of recent origin. An earlier study shows that studies between 1900 to 1992, we had very few studies. We began with one study in 1900, and by the time we reached 1992, we had about 500. It's only after 1992 things started changing in terms of a lot of funding agencies started realizing that this is an area of importance and we should give attention to it. So this is where we began, and post 1992, lots of people have gotten involved, both institutions and individuals across the board. So we have individuals and institutions. For instance, we had one in Tirupati, that was Professor Ramamurthy. So he was among the pioneers. Then we had Kalyan Bagchi. Then we had Professor P.C. Bhatla. Helpage India gets into the picture. ICSSR gets into the picture. After that, we have seen that couple of articles, papers, seminars taking place. So ICSSR began with the first one. We were able to get 2 volumes on annotated bibliography on aging. This was immediately followed by the Tata Institute taking interest, and they came out with several volumes on the bibliographical aspects of aging. So these are two reference, books which one could consult if when you're trying to do your research. Now, getting to researching in the area of social gerontology. What happens now? Older people are more concerned about their confidentiality of information and anonymity. They are very reluctant to enter into any, being a subject of inquiry. First of all, as a researcher, we'll have to communicate with them, establish rapport with them, gain their confidence, and then only we'll be able to elicit information for the purpose of our own research. Now, if they feel that their autonomy is threatened by the way the researcher approaches them, then it's very difficult for a researcher to be able to elicit information. So what do they do? Elder people are normally considered as a vulnerable population. Not all of them are vulnerable, but some are. So if they are vulnerable, then you'll require adherence to the ethical standards and practices which are normally followed. So what happens is this vulnerability is context specific. Older people experience several symptoms such as pain, fatigue, they have hearing problems. Now these might impede their giving information to you. So you will have to make extra efforts to understand them, understand the situation in which they are. So in terms of this is very, very important. And if you are able to overcome and gain their confidence, I think you have gone a long way to get the information you're looking for. So these ethical issues are also related to the design and conduct of your study. So what should be those things? Ethical considerations make the researcher ask such questions as, will the proposed strategy violate the participants' privacy? Now, if it is going to violate that privacy, I'm afraid you'll not be able to get the information you are looking for. Because if this privacy is affected, then it will also disrupt the social life in their daily work. Now, the next question is, even the respondents, I mean, don't treat them as if they are illiterate. You will have lots of them who are highly educated, literate, and also in the coming generations, they'll be highly digital literate. So, when they are approached to be participants for your studies, then they'll also question themselves, are they putting themselves in danger while they are participating in your study? Now, this is second. Another question they will think about, or you'll also have to think about, will this study violate the issue of human rights, their human rights? Now, there will be lots of problems on this, so one ought to be careful while doing such type of research. Now, why do you think ethics is important? And if we keep the ethical standards and the principles in mind, then what does it do? One, it ensures the integrity of research results. They'll also protect the safety of both the respondents and the researcher. So they also help the participants from being exploited or treated unfairly. So they also ensure that the rights of the participants to participate will be protected. So these are things which are important. Another major ethical question is whether the participants are fully informed about the work and the risks that are entailed in this type of research. They'll also look at the likelihood whether they would be benefited or not. Now, it's more important before we begin, all research subjects must be given full information about the proposed study, the risks that are involved, and the benefits that they will derive. And also, you'll have to disclose this information to them and seek their permission when you propose to publish. Now, another question which will come up in this study will be whether the respondents are to be paid. In some cases, scholars do pay them for their participation. Now, this is left entirely to the discretion of the scholar and the participant. Sometimes you need not have to pay, sometimes you may have to pay. You will have to keep this in mind because there are other problems. So, what they feel is if you offer them money, they might find that this is very risky and that they are being fooled. So, one has to be very, very careful on this. So, informed consent is a major ethical issue in conducting research. So, this also will mean you have to incorporate their autonomy. Now, they are free to join and they are free to leave. So, they should be told. So, sometimes the scholars, while participating, they may not realize, but when you begin asking them personal questions, they will rethink whether to continue participating in the study or whether they would like to quit. Now, if you say you cannot quit, then it runs into other difficulties. Primarily, they'll feel threatened that their autonomy and freedom is being curtailed and their personal liberty is at stake. So, what happens? What are the requirements of informed consent? One, they must be competent to understand and decide whether to join or not join the project. Whether they receive full disclosure of the proposed thing and whether they are really able to understand and comprehend what you have been disclosing to them. Now, this also would be, it would involve voluntary consent. So you cannot force them. So it's voluntary. So sometimes scholars do insist on informed consent being taken in writing. At many other times, if you have scholar, your participants are not highly educated, they are unable to read and write, then someone else will help them out. You will have to ensure that they have the full permission to. Now, what does these ethical considerations mean? One, the right to conduct, that they do not transcend cultures, region, religions, other groups. So here what happens? What are those? It's called the beneficence. It's not, not to kill, not to harm, not to cause suffering to others. These would be the general normal principles or norms which are mostly seen in cultures, regions, and religions. The next one is called non-maleficence. So this is the obligation of the researcher not to harm the respondent. There are cases, there are studies which show that scholars have inflicted harm on the respondents. Third one will be the autonomy. Here the persons have the intrinsic and unconditional worth, and therefore they should have the power to make decisions whether to join or not to join. The next principle would be justice. This is interpreted as fair, equitable, and appropriate treatment to the patient, to the respondents. So, what will informed consent mean? You tell them the truth. From the truth emerges confidentiality. Persons feel comfortable. Persons are now willing to provide the information you're looking for. Unless you wait through this, it will be very difficult. So, research is primarily not easy, it's time consuming, it's exciting, it's also frustrating. One should have the time, the patience, and the resources to be able to do such research. With this, from all these ethical things, once we upload and they feel they are confidential, their data will be kept confidential. So when you are looking at data and trying to analyze data, you should see that you do not reveal the identity of the research participant to anyone. You can then use fake names or aggregate data. For instance, in my study on the teachers of Delhi University, I had this problem. So here ethical issues come in because they are highly educated. They had their own questions. So what happened was, at times when the questionnaire was given to them before I began the interview subsequently, many times they would go by my face value. Okay, you're working in such and such a department, so we have no problem. Sometimes they would ask you, who's your research supervisor? The name of the research supervisor also carried a lot of weight. Now there were women colleges. Delhi University has a large number of women's colleges. Now a male member could never enter a college, a women's college. So you would have to seek someone who would escort you and seek entry in the college. So there are various ways of going about it. But once they really got knowing, they got to know what the study is all about, they were forthcoming. In fact, this study went on to show that I had 95% response to the questionnaire. They, in fact, went on to say that we would like you to interview us extensively. So I interviewed all of them. So you have a combination of everything. They also gave me a lot of research material, which would normally not have been available to an individual scholar. Things like uh, faculty meetings within the college, faculty meetings within the departments of the university. They were made available to me, and that is something very different. So that's it. So thank you very much. for your patient listening. Yes, ma'am, I'm through.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a thought-provoking lecture. I would now like to open the meet for the questions from the participants. So if you have any questions, could you please ask, sir? Promita, go ahead.
Please.
Such a thought-provoking lecture. So my name is Promita, and I am doing my PhD from the University of Calcutta. So my question to you is that you mentioned about vulnerability of older people is context specific, right? So can you kindly please elaborate on that a bit? How is it context specific?
You see, what happens is if you are not well, if you are in a hospital setting, if you are, there are elders who are in the prisons, and if someone wants to interview the prisoners, somebody wants to interview women, particularly widows, they are vulnerable. It's not that everyone is vulnerable, but there will be people who will be vulnerable, but certain categories, like instance prisoners and all. Here you'll also have to seek permission from the Ministry of Home Affairs, because they have the data on these, and you need permission. And if it is the widows and in the hospitals, because if there is a patient in the hospital, then you would also need permission from his caretakers, caregivers, and his family members. And if they are suffering from some illness, then again they are vulnerable, because people might think that you are trying to exploit them. So one has to be pretty careful while handling such research subjects. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good morning, Dr. Bali. I am Dr. Soumitra Basu. I am a gerontologist also. I am
Welcome.
Yes,
Welcome to the family.
yes, sir. Actually, we met at the Asiatic Society some earlier back. You, Professor Chadha, we met at, and sir, I am very much grateful that for your nice deliberation. Sir, I have a very few questions regarding the ethics, specifically when some researcher is working on, say, elderly widows, say from some Sundarban areas, the tiger widows, and or some working on dementia patients like this. So in this kind of research, what kind of ethics should be maintained by a researcher?
See, primarily, if you're handling a patient who is suffering from dementia, let's take that case. Now, the person will not be able to remember, so you will have to have someone who will be able to, give you the consent.
Okay.
It will be, maybe his relative, maybe the caregiver, maybe an institutional setup. If the person is admitted to an institutional setup, then you will need permission. Someone will have to, say yes to it. Now you'll need that permission. So that's basically informed consent. So it can be from the patient, it can be from the caregivers, it can be from his family members. Someone will have to
present.
Yeah, they will have to vouch for the participation. That's what.
And that will act as my consent. Okay.
Yeah, their consent for you to undertake the study.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Nagma, go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead, Nehaji.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Neha Dasgupta and I am a PhD student at the University of Calcutta. Sir, I would like to thank you for such an useful and comprehensive session. So my question is regarding the situation where the respondents may be offered a monetary payment at the discretion of the scholar. Sir, my question is that could that possibly be an intervening variable that could impact the results or the outcome of the research?
There are two things to this. It cuts both ways. In some cases, people have offered, I have also seen that they would ask you, what benefit will I get if I give you this information or data? On the other side, there's also the trouble or the problem that if you offer them money, they might think that you're coercing them to part with the data, part with the information, or participate in your research. So it cuts both ways. Now you have to be extremely careful how do you handle. This is very sensitive because it also touches upon the dignity of the person. Now I'll give you an example. Now look at how it went. Here was a person who is traveling, elderly person. His spectacles were cracked, so he's trying to rotate his spectacles and rotate the newspaper. Now it took me almost 15 to 20 minutes. How do I handle it? So with great difficulty, I decided, let me ask him a question. Don't you find it difficult to read the paper because there is a problem in your spectacles? Then he comes out. He said, "Sir, मैं क्या करूँ? My daughter-in-law does not give me money to buy a pair of spectacles." Then I told him, you go to a particular place and they are providing free spectacles, free eye testing. Why don't you go there? So next day he did go. The other people standing there, they overheard this conversation, and they went. Later on, now what does this tell? One is lack of information. Two, handling the person. He felt very thrilled that there is somebody who is trying to help. There could have been another person. Who the hell are you to tell me that I should do this or do that? So it cuts both ways.
Okay, sir, I understand. Thank you so much, sir. That was very helpful.
Yes, Nagma.
Good morning, sir. Nagma here, and I'm doing PhD from the University of Calcutta. So, first of all, thank you so much for such an enlightening lecture, sir. And here, sir, you talked about that we have to seriously examine this gerontological study, right? And we have certain economic aspects of aging and the ethical issues that we have to consider. But when, for say, if I will be doing research on this people who are living in old age home, right? So we already know that they are going through a lot of emotional, problems or traumas, and they have a lot of things because they are living outside their place where they used to live, and they are not living with their family. So sometimes it is like emotionally they are very sensitive and weak. So in such cases, how we will deal with such respondents, and what are the ways?
See, primarily, first of all, you'll have to gain their confidence. That's the first thing. You'll have to gain their confidence. Make them feel comfortable. Because we have studies where widows were involved, and you have to gain their confidence. There's no other way. Both, say for instance, if a widow is staying in a particular old age home, now how do you handle it? Even if she wants to give the information, her friends may not be willing to allow her to do that, or the organizers of the uh, place where she's staying may or may not. So these are things which it varies from individual to individual. Even the the researcher might get carried away, because then over a period of time, I know people who have worked in this area, particularly older women and the widows. They themselves feel so emotional, they have to walk out of the thing. They said we can't bear this pain, agony of the widows. So it's that's why I said human nature is very difficult. You have to make them understand, and also make them feel that you are listening to them, because listening is more important. They want to say certain things, tell you certain things. So if you are patient and if you are able to listen to them, and then they feel, okay, here is one person who listens to my problems, will be able to help me out. Now whether you will be really able to help them or not, that's a different question. But yes, the moment you feel that there's someone who's listening to you, there's someone who cares for you. Now these are things which will come out as you keep into talking to them, because this is a long drawn process. You simply can't say I go today and come out with it. No, you will have to get them involved. You will also get involved in their problems over a period of time. So then the question of object and subject gets blurred many a times. You might become one of them rather than they becoming one of you. So one has to be very careful. This is a very, very tight line which one has to walk across.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Okay, thank you participants for your questions. I would now like to request Dr. Sudeshna Basu Mukherjee to kindly give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor Bali. Thank you for your enlightening lecture.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome, sir. Uh, we've been together for so long in this area of gerontology that I thought you would be one of those people who have so many experiences that you could share with our students.
There's one thing which I would like to tell you. Now,
Yes.
what happens is here was Professor Krishna Sopti. I don't know whether you know her. So, again, one of those brilliant people. And she went to the hospital in Simla when I was doing my work. So, she went and talked to the doctor. Doctor said, "Bhaiya, mera check karo." And he said, "Madam, you are 77 years old. जिंदगी ऐसी चलती रहेगी, आप जाइए." He said, "Nonsense, you are not supposed to tell me that. I know what I am. But you must tell me what is wrong and how do I correct my health issues." So it also depends on the attitude of the doctors, because we don't have doctors who handle geriatric problems.
Yeah, exactly. Except for Bangalore, there is no geriatric hospital in India at all. The Nightingale Hospital in Bangalore, that is the only hospital that is dedicated to geriatric.
Yeah, the other one is our friend Gangadharan.
Yes, that's Bangalore.
No, that's Hyderabad.
Okay, Gangadharan is in Hyderabad. Okay.
So these are the two places I know of.
We know of, exactly. But there are geriatric wards everywhere because that is a compulsive, I would say it is within the policy of the health ministry that they have to keep a geriatric ward with at least a minimum of 8 ward beds.
That's true.
Anyway, let me do the formality that I am requested to do. Thank you, Professor Bali, for accepting my request and delivering this lecture today to our students who are doing PhD as well as our students of the 3rd semester. To inform my students, Professor Bali has been, I wouldn't say a friend, a senior professor with whom I have been associated, say, ever since 2008. When the UNFPA, the United Nations Fund for Aging, they they started funding a study on the report on the status of elderly in some selected states, where West Bengal was one of the states that was selected because of the percentage of aged people in the state. And I was the only academician on that panel to be representing West Bengal with Dr. Indrani Chakraborty, who is also a representative of West Bengal in the gerontological parlor of studies. Now, this was a study we had done for, say, 4 years. It extended till 2013 almost, though the report is supposed to be published in the year 2011. And over that time, I think we visited Kerala, Mumbai, Delhi over and over again, and I met Professor Bali there. And I came to know how, I don't say eloquency, I say the style of oration is so simple, but he says such a lot of things within those simple sentences that he's giving. So a very informative way of talking and a very I would say it would be very nice to say that Sir is a very good speaker, but I wouldn't say that. I would rather say that Sir is a very reachable speaker, one you can understand very well.
Thank you.
Even after that, I have been working with Sir in other spheres of academics, and I think I know him as a senior friend, a philosopher, and at times you can even fall back on him to ask what one should do. He has been the director of ICSSR, and that is one of the institutes or one of the institutions that is very important for social science. So his knowledge sharing with us is also very enriching. I think my students here who has asked questions have also to be congratulated for asking those questions because they were very relevant.
Sure.
And once again, I thank Professor Bali for accepting my request at such a short notice. After I came back on the 20th, I thought I should ask sir, and then I asked him to deliver this lecture, and he did so. So thank you, sir, from the Department of Sociology, University of Calcutta, for making this possible.
Thank you very much for your kind words. And also, I thank all the participants who took part in this lecture. I hope if they have any further questions, they're always welcome to write to me or speak to me.
Okay. Over to Claire.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, sir. Thank you for taking your time out today. And thank you all the participants as well for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.